Making Comics 101, Issue 2, Ideas. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where together we are going to be creating some awesome comics, because this is Making Comics 101. This is issue 2, where we're going to talk about ideas. And just a little refresh, if you are jumping into this series for the first time, that's all right. If you want to go back and you want to watch issue 1, you're welcome to do that. But this show is designed where you can kind of drop in anytime, because each episode, or issues as we're calling them, because this is all about comics, is about one particular part of the whole process of making comics. So we can kind of jump around, we can start from the beginning, we can jump in almost anywhere we want. But today we're talking about ideas, because that is one of the biggest issues with starting comics is, you know, what are we writing about? What are we drawing? What are we going to be drawing? I don't know what to do. And we're going to help you with all that stuff, because sometimes it's difficult. You know, you sit there in front of a blank comic page, or you know, your computer ready to script out your comic or whatever, and what are we going to be creating? What are we going to write about? All right, so the first thing we have to do is we have to ask ourselves some questions. All right, and we have 6 questions we need to ask. Do you guys know what those questions are? If you don't, once I give you the first question, you will know the other 5. So the first question you need to ask yourself is who. So obviously we're gonna who, what, where, when, why, and how. Those are the 6 questions that we need to ask ourselves. And once we have those, we've got a pretty good idea, at least a pretty good starting point for our comic book. So who are the characters in our story? We have to come up with who the story is about. You know, what are their goals? We'll go into more on actually creating stories and storytelling in a future issue, but for right now, you know, we just want to get the basic, you know, who are we talking about? Who's in our story? And of course, like I mentioned before, if we're first starting out creating comics, you probably want to keep those down to the basics. Don't get too involved with too many characters, because the goal is actually to finish a comic, not get bogged down in all this other stuff. So who, that's the first question we need to think about. Who are our characters? And then you can get into a little more about, you know, their personalities and all that other kind of stuff. All right, what's going on in the world? What is the plot? What is the story going to be about? What's going to take place? So who, what, and then we move on to where. Where is this story taking place? Is this, you know, on a far off planet? Is it in the Old West? It could be anywhere, or any time, or any place, or even something that doesn't exist, that's totally out of your own imagination. But we have to kind of establish where this is taking place. The next is when. When is it taking place? Like I said, the Old West. If we're going to do the Old West, it's probably going to take place you know, back in the 1800s. There's so many different angles we can take, and we could even tell stories like Old West type stories in the future. And we'll get into, I'll talk a little bit more about some of those ideas in a minute. But so when does it take place? Is it during the Renaissance, medieval times? Does it take place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? We just need to know, you know, when the story is taking place. Why? Why is this happening? What's happening to our characters? Why are they reacting to what's happening? Why, you know, what's the why in our story? Very important to know that. The other thing is how. How are our heroes, assuming this is sort of a hero's journey story, how are they going to defeat whatever the obstacle is? How, you know, how is the story going to unfold? How do people react in certain situations? All these how questions are things that we need to think about too. So we need to ask those first 6 questions. Next thing we want to talk about is brainstorming. So brainstorming, just basically in general, just generating ideas. And in the beginning, it's best to kind of have this sort of blue sky mentality. A lot of, like, especially animation studios have adopted this. One in particular even named their company after this idea. But blue sky is basically the idea that the sky is the limit. There's nothing, you know, nothing is unheard of, nothing is taboo. You know, just throw whatever ideas out there, and then as you're bouncing ideas back and forth, you can kind of say, well, I like that or I don't. But the other, I guess, rule to this blue sky idea is there are no bad ideas. Because, not to say that there aren't any bad ideas or there aren't any ideas that really don't work for this story. When you're trying to come up with a story and you're generating ideas, Don't be concerned about, especially if you're doing this in a setting with more people, and that usually, as far as brainstorming, it kind of usually just helps if there's more than one person involved, but you can kind of do this yourself, you can kind of as well. But when you're throwing ideas out in a kind of this idea of no bad ideas, blue sky, the idea is don't be hesitant to throw out an idea because you don't think it's good or whatever, because even if an idea is not right for that story, there's so many times, and I've been in situations like this where somebody throws out an idea, just this ridiculous idea, and you're like, I mean, it makes no sense to the story, but then there's something there. It's like, wait a minute, there's this seemingly bad idea could lead to something else that might be a great idea, or could change the whole course of the story. So you're really doing yourself a disservice if you are kind of holding back and not just throwing out everything and just kind of see what works, because in the beginning stages of storytelling, you don't want to be hindered by anything. You want to be able to get all those ideas out, and then you can kind of hone in on kind of what the story is all about. So when we're brainstorming, it's very important to record kind of some of these ideas that we're coming up with. Everyone's got this device in their pocket. Most of the time there's a little voice recorder. You could just record that, throw ideas out. You can go on a hangout with your friends and make sure that that's like recorded, and then you can go back and watch the replay. You can jot stuff down in a notebook, whether it's a physical notebook or, I use Evernote. Also there's notes apps, there's all kinds of things, but we definitely want to record it, because you'd hate to throw out an idea and or maybe an idea that you may not think is right in the moment, but when you're going back, you may look at that and say, wait a minute, there's something there. So you definitely want to record all that stuff. I've got a number of storytelling tools. I've got a few products right now. One is a free download. It's called the Comic Maker Starter Kit, and there is what's called a mind map in there, and it's excellent for kind of coming up with ideas. You start with a central idea, sort of in a circle, and then you kind of branch out from there. It's a non-linear way of developing stories, rather than just writing things down in list forms. I find mind maps to be, incredibly helpful. So there's one of those. If you want to download that, there's a link in the description, and I've got other packs that have even more stuff for storytelling. But beyond that, I mean, you could do whatever you want. Whatever your process is, it's fine. I mean, there's really no one way to make comics or to come up with ideas. I mean, sure, this is like one of my all-time favorite books, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and there's a specific way that Marvel created comics, at least back when this book was written. But it's not the only way. It may not be the best way. This way may be perfect for you. There's no one way to do it. So, that's the one thing you have to kind of keep in mind, because people will give you all kinds of different advice. I mean, I'm giving you advice right now, but even the advice that I'm giving you, if something doesn't feel right that I'm saying, don't worry about it. I'm trying to put out, some advice to kind of help you guys out, but take everything with a grain of salt, because the way I create comics may not be best for you, or the way I generate ideas, but I do want to give you some different avenues of exploring ideas and everything like that. Okay, so here's sort of the fun part, or the value pack part, hopefully. Here's the thing that we all kind of face, is the dreaded writer's block or creative block. How do we get past that? What are some ways that we can come up with ideas for our story if it's just not coming to us? We need a little help. Well, here's some tips, some advice on different ways that you can kind of help generate some of your ideas, some writing prompts, if you will. We talked about the blue sky thing and just throwing, everything in the kitchen sink and coming up with these different, possible ideas for our stories, and that is great, and I definitely recommend that. But once you explored that, it's kind of good to kind of rein things back and create restrictions, because especially if this is your first comic, you really probably want to keep things simple. So why not start off by eliminating some of these other distractions and everything, and keep it. This is what I'm going to do with the story. I'm going to basically, through this series, I am going to come up with an idea for, a story, and I'm going to keep it very simple. I am going to keep it to maybe like 3 characters, 1 location, and maybe we'll just make it a 4-page story. We don't want to make it huge or anything like that. I think limitations are something that can really help us out. Actually, in some ways, limitations can be freeing, and I know that sounds weird and you know, very woo-woo and out there, but they can creatively, when you have limitations, it can kind of get you a little more focused and everything, especially after the initial idea generating, the mind maps and the brainstorming and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, let's get down to some of these tips and some advice on what to do if you're having trouble coming up with ideas for your story. The first thing to consider is maybe writing a real life story. Chances are in your life you've had some experiences, maybe some funny events or maybe embarrassing events, or maybe some cool things that have happened to you, or maybe not even happened to you. Maybe you witnessed happening to others. That might be a really cool story. One of my very good friends, Joshua Kimball, that's what he writes. He writes autobio stories. Most of his stories, including the one he's writing right now, is about his experience. And you know, it can be serious. It can, I mean, his comics are very serious, but it can be comical. I mean, even like my comic book, Young and the Dead, it's about kids versus zombies, but a lot of the characters are loosely based on me. So or my friends that I had growing up. It's almost like the idea is that if I put myself when I was 11 years old in a situation where there was a zombie apocalypse, how would myself and my friends react? It's not really autobio, it's not true in any sense of the imagination, but it is, it's based somewhat, you know, a little bit here and there on real life. The other thing you can do is an adaptation, and I just did one of these for the 100 Days of Making Comics anthology where I adapted a song. So this is a story, it's called Many Miles Away. It's based on a song by The Police called Synchronicity 2. And yeah, so I just took that song, and it's to me it was always a very visual song, and I was like, this is really interesting. When I listen to the song, these images are playing out in my head. Why not just draw a comic about it? You can adapt this song. There's so many different things you can adapt, really. There's all kinds of great stuff out there. So if you don't necessarily want to take lyrics and develop a story based on that, you can do a fan comic. You know, what are you a fan of? This may not be something that you can eventually publish. I don't know the legalities of fan comics, but that might be a way to go. Also, a nice middle ground for something like that are public domain stories. There are so many stories out there that are free to use that are in the public domain. Characters like Sherlock Holmes, or I don't know, I think Tarzan's in the public domain, like Alice in Wonderland, that you can take and do your own spin on any of those characters. Just look and see what characters are in the public domain, and yeah, I think there's even some newer ones that have just recently or are coming in the public domain, like, you know, Zorro and stuff like that. So there's a lot of great stuff out there that you could just take these already existing characters and tell your own version of those stories. So just do a little research on public domain characters and try to figure out how you can adapt those. You can also change things around. There are public domain comics that are free to use, like the old Blue Beetles and stuff like that. Not the newest incarnation, but you know, there's all kinds of these old comic books that are out there that we could take those characters and do something new with them. I think like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen that was done a while back, I think Alan Moore did that, but he took like Captain Nemo and all these characters that existed and he recreated them and kind of put them together as a team. So there's a lot of great stuff out there that we can sort of draw from, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, I don't know. You can always take a public domain story or any story and change it around so it's different than it was before. A great example of a story that has been told many times over and over again but with a different spin would be like Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. I mean, Seven Samurai was a story about samurais, but you know what people had come along and they took the exact same story for the most part and just kind of changed the setting and the characters, but the plot and everything exactly the same. So they did it as a Western with Magnificent Seven. They took it into outer space with Battle Beyond the Stars. They even made an animated series with Bug's Life. It's all the same story from Seven Samurai. So you could take a story that already exists that you like and just kind of put it in a different setting and different characters. That's a great way to go. That's something that I haven't done personally, but I think I kind of want to do sort of that approach. Another one is like Romeo and Juliet. I mean, a lot of Shakespeare stuff has just been told over and over again in different settings. So go back and and find some of this stuff and kind of do your own version of it. Place it in a different setting. Another idea for generating stories is kind of like that rip from the headlines thing. So you always hear these stranger than fiction news articles and everything like that. Like, what? This is bizarre. How could this possibly be true? And some of these are just great because they are true. So there's nothing stopping you from taking and making a comic book out of it, or at least an aspect of it. Something that's happened in real life, and you can almost like a real life event, and maybe make your own characters and kind of put them into that. I mean, that's kind of like what James Cameron did with Titanic. The Titanic was a real event that happened, but those characters didn't exist. He just created these characters and wove them through these real life events. Same thing with what Quentin Tarantino did with, what was it, Once Upon a Time in the West? Is that or Hollywood? Not. I'm getting those confused, but I don't know. I think it's the latest. I'm recording this, the latest Quentin Tarantino. I haven't seen it, but yeah, the backdrop of like the whole Charles Manson thing and everything. But he created his own characters that weren't really there. They didn't really exist, but he kind of put them into that story. He also did the same thing with Inglourious Basterds. So, whatever there's so many different things you could do. But I like the idea of these. Take a real life event and then kind of put your own characters into it. Here's another one. Marvel Comics used to do this series called What If, and they would just take these crazy scenarios, their characters, and put them in different things. Like, what if somebody else had found Thor's hammer, or it could be anything. What if the Incredible Hulk was in outer space? And I think they actually made a series out. I think Planet Hulk or whatever. But you can do these, come up with these crazy ideas, like what if? And then, I mean, once you start asking yourself questions like what if, I mean, that just opens up a whole world of, the ideas just really start to flow from that, because that is a great question. So just ask yourself, what if? What if this? What if that? What if something that doesn't seem possible could be possible? And that could get you off and running on another idea for your story. Another great prompt, if you're kind of struggling, something you want to start when you're first starting off your comic was like, one of the questions that a lot of people ask or a statement you make when first starting writing your comics is, everything was fine until one day. And there's so many stories that use this approach. I mean, Star Wars was one of those. I mean, Luke Skywalker, he's out on the farm, he wants to get out, he can't do anything, he's got to stay and help his family farm and everything. And all of a sudden, the rebellion just drops on his front doorstep. And so that's one thing. Harry Potter, I mean, here's this kid that lives in this cupboard under the stairs. His life is just miserable, and then one day he realizes he's a wizard, and he goes off to a wizarding school. Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, same thing. She's out in Kansas, not much going on over there, and then she get whisked away to the land of Oz. So everything was fine until one day is a great way to kind of spark some ideas for your story and get you going. Another bit of advice that I think that holds a lot of people back is this whole idea of originality and everything's done before. What else can I tell? Sure, a lot of these, and we've kind of, like what we've mentioned before with stories that have been told in different settings and everything, you can do different things, and you can take a story. I'm sure there's probably other stories out there similar to Young and the Dead where there's kids fighting zombies, but they're not going to have told that story in the same way that I did. So don't really let that hold you back if you're worried about that. Sure, everything in some way, shape, or form has probably been done before, but you're going to add your own voice to that. You're going to put your spin on it and everything. So in virtue of that, it's just going to become an original idea if you take it in a different direction. So don't be too afraid that your idea might not be original, or that somebody's going to take it or whatever, because even if somebody's telling the same story that you are, they're probably not going to do it the way you're doing it. A couple other things that could generate ideas is like, so have you ever been watching a movie or reading a book or something, and you think it's going to go one way, and you kind of got in your mind like, oh, I see what's going to happen, this is going to happen, and then it doesn't. It goes somewhere else, and you're like, in your mind, you're like, man, I think my idea that I had where this was going to go was better than what they came up with. So that might be something. Just change the characters around and tell your story, but go in the direction you want to go. There's so many times I was like, man, I wish wish this would have happened instead. Tell that story. Tell your own version of a story that exists there. Of course, again, you got to change the characters and everything and make it your own. But there are so many stories out there like that where it just, you know, I saw something, you know, the other day that was, oh, it was a great concept. I love the concept. And when I heard about it, I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna really dig what this thing is, and I don't want to mention it. And then when I started reading it, I was like, oh man, I think I might have been able to do a better job with this idea. So whether I actually take that and do something of my own, I don't know. But there's all kinds of stuff out there like that. So if you come across something that just you don't think was executed the proper way, or you think you could do a better job, then do it. And the last bit of advice that I want to give to you is just write what you know. We are all experts in something. So what is your passion? What do you love to do? What do you like to watch on TV? What do you like to read? What do you like to research? What fascinates you? And tell that story, because who's going to know better than you? So yeah, just write what you know. Like I said, when I'm writing Young and the Dead, I mean, you don't know, you know, really what a zombie apocalypse would be, but I know how at least I think I know how I would react as a kid, or my friends would react. I know those people, so it's easy for me to put my characters in this situation when I know how each one of them would react, because I know them in a way, because I know who they're based on, and then, or you know, or sometimes they're amalgamation of a couple different people. But I get an idea of what's going to happen because I know the subject matter. So whatever I don't want to say it, you don't have to be an expert, but whatever you're into, write that story, because chances are you know a lot about that stuff, and your story is going to be better than a lot of people telling that story, because maybe they're not really into that. So that one almost maybe goes without saying, because I think in general you're probably going to write something that you're interested in, but who knows. So anyway, those are some tips and some advice that I have for generating ideas for your comics, getting started. There's so many different ideas out there, or different tools and tricks and things that can kind of help you out with that, and things that I probably haven't even mentioned. These are just some things that I use. But if you've got better ideas or other ideas, let me know in the comments section. I want this to be sort of an interactive thing. Let's talk about this in the comments section. What gives you ideas when creating comics? What do you dive into? We'll get into some other stuff, some other research, and there's going to be, you know, this is a continuing series. There's going to be a lot more episodes, and maybe we'll even have some bonus content where we'll go in and kind of go deeper into some of this stuff. But that's all in the future, in the upcoming episode. So stay tuned, and I will see you guys later. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. If you like making comics, then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.